Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I've got to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled about the journey we're going on today. Our goal, and it's a bold one, is to unpack this genuinely fascinating proposal that tries to do the impossible. Build a bridge between hard, modern science and ancient cosmological wisdom. We're actually going to look at a real-world cover letter. It was written to a cutting-edge scientific organization, and it proposes a radically new way to study the human experience, arguing exactly why science desperately needs spiritual data to move forward.
So, let's jump right into this with a massive question. Is reality just a headset? I mean, seriously, take a second to really think about that. What if the human experience, literally everything you see, hear, taste, and touch right now, is actually just a reduced user interface of a much, much larger multidimensional reality? Think about it like the desktop on your computer. The icons hide the ridiculously complex code underneath, right? So, what if our physical universe is just a biological desktop hiding the true source code of consciousness?
To see how scientists and spiritual thinkers are actually tackling this, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the quest for consciousness. Look at reality as a headset. Check out an unlikely scientific alliance. Explore mapping the spiritual data. Bring in the parapsychology connection, and wrap up with a new interdisciplinary science.
All right, starting with part one, the quest for consciousness, and the rather massive gap between hard science and subjective experience.
For a long time, there's been this huge wall right down the middle of human understanding. On one side, you have objective reality. Historically, science has treated consciousness as just, well, a byproduct of the brain doing its thing. It's all about matter, neural processes, testable data, the physical stuff. But then on the other side, you've got subjective experience. Things like deep spirituality, clairvoyance, our rich internal lives. For centuries, these two worlds wouldn't even talk to each other. Science basically didn't know what to do with spiritual data, and the spiritual side didn't have the mathematical language to talk to the scientists.
But here is where it gets incredibly fascinating. The author of our source letter, Johan Kukulkan HunabKú of the United Universe Church Galaxy Academy, writes this to a major scientific body called the Trace Institute. He says personal and family experiences should not be casually dismissed, but neither should they be presented uncritically as objective evidence. What is needed is a careful, scientifically sound approach. I love this because it shows such profound epistemic humility. You know, Johan isn't out here demanding that science blindly swallows spiritual claims. He's calling for a rigorous, balanced investigation.
And that leads us right into part two, reality as a headset, and the Trace Institute's mathematical framework.
Okay, so the Trace Institute, who are actually gearing up for a major launch in January 2027, they operate on a mathematical framework called conscious realism, sometimes known as interface theory. This is the actual scientific thesis that space, time, and matter are not fundamental. Instead, they function as a reduced user interface, a literal headset of consciousness. If consciousness is the actual bedrock of reality, then suddenly things we used to brush off as paranormal or spiritual glitches, well, they aren't just hallucinations anymore. They become mathematically relevant data points of the underlying code.
In fact, the Trace Institute is already developing what they call trace logic to mathematically model these boundaries of consciousness. They've even been collaborating on models involving DMT experiences to push the very edges of what we consider normal. This openness to exploring boundary states, it creates the absolute perfect opening for Johan's proposal.
Which brings us perfectly to part three, an unlikely scientific alliance bridging cosmological wisdom and math. Now, we're talking about bringing together two wildly different worlds here. In one corner, you've got the Trace Institute with its rigorous math, conscious realism, and hard logic. And in the other corner, you have Johan's organization, the UUCGA, bringing ancient cosmological wisdom, concepts of a holographic simulation, and cosmic Anunnaki spirituality. I mean, these are two groups speaking completely different languages. But the kicker is, they're looking at the exact same problem: figuring out the true nature of reality.
To really get why Johan proposed this alliance in the first place, we have to look at his personal story. He was raised Catholic in the Jordan district of Amsterdam, but his official religion totally clashed with a hidden family lineage he didn't even know about until later. He eventually discovered that his grandmother and aunt maintained an active clairvoyant practice right there in his old neighborhood. It made him realize that clairvoyance and magnetism aren't just abstract myths, they are living, transmissible experiences within human families. And honestly, that realization is what sparked this whole quest. His deep dive into his own consciousness led Johan to explore his cosmic Anunnaki spirituality. He makes this really interesting point, noting that the higher self can initially feel like something extraterrestrial to the conditioned ego. Now, the crucial takeaway for us here is how he positions this. Johan isn't demanding the Trace Institute accept this as hard biological fact, not at all. He's presenting it purely as phenomenological data. It's a subjective experience that he believes can and should be mathematically modeled.
So how do we do that? Let's get into part 4, mapping the spiritual data and their joint research agenda.
The sheer diversity of this proposed interdisciplinary research agenda is just mind-blowing. Johan is basically suggesting they map highly abstract spiritual concepts straight into the Trace Institute's hard trace logic. We're talking about the math modeling of meditation, lucid dreaming, channeling. He wants to study the biology of intergenerational transmission, like how female egg cell lineages create an unbroken biological chain. He even proposes looking at indigenous time systems, like the 13-moon Maya calendar, as alternative interfaces for reality. And finally, using all of this to help artificial general intelligence distinguish a simulated reality from the interface itself. This right here is exactly why science needs spiritual data, to provide the vast, uncharted source code that math alone just can't invent.
A huge part of this data comes from the UUCGA's cosmological framework, which they call the Maya Love Enlightenment Game, or MLAG. And MLAG actually aligns perfectly with the Trace Institute's whole headset theory. It treats reality as a participatory, holographic simulation, where the human experience as we know it is just one single layer of a vast, multidimensional reality. Obviously, getting our heads around that requires some massive epistemic humility from all of us. Now, to genuinely study all this, Johan realized they needed a third player. That brings us to part 5, the parapsychology connection, bringing in empirical expertise.
Enter the Parapsychological Institute, or PI, based over in the Netherlands. And let's be clear, this is not some new fringe group. They were founded way back in 1953 as part of Utrecht University, became an independent foundation in 1980, and today they offer a worldwide network. The PI brings decades of serious, worldview-neutral scientific history, rigorously documenting non-ordinary experiences like out-of-body states and UFO close encounters.
So, here is the absolutely crucial point. Look at how these three pillars lock together to form a complete science. First, you have the Trace Institute, bringing the rigorous mathematical models and trace logic. Second, the UUCGA provides the raw spiritual source code, the phenomenological experiences. And third, the PI acts as the anchor, providing objective empirical documentation and clinical expertise. Together, they create a solid, foundational bridge.
Which leads us to our final section, part 6, a new interdisciplinary science and the future of consciousness research. Ultimately, what Johan's letter represents is a massive call for collaborative research. And why does this matter to you and me? Well, because if they actually succeed in modeling this, it fundamentally redefines where humanity comes from. It maps out the exact sensory constraints of the biological headsets we're all walking around in right now. Plus, it builds a vital roadmap for the future development of AI and consciousness. It's about rewriting how we understand our very existence, proving that to truly understand the hardware of our universe, science desperately needs the spiritual data of human experience.
Johan sums up the sheer ambition of this incredibly well. He says, what today falls outside the scope of a single discipline may tomorrow prove to be the starting point of a new interdisciplinary science. That is the ultimate synthesis, isn't it? Bridging the most objective, mathematically rigorous science we have with the deepest, most subjective, spiritual data of the human experience. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder today. If reality really is just a headset, as this proposed alliance aims to prove, how soon will future math and artificial general intelligence figure out how to reprogram it? And when they do, how will that fundamentally reshape what you perceive as real? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next explainer.